Hi and welcome, and we're really excited to be having Polly and who else do we have there from the Neonto team?
This is Antti. Yeah, hi.
Hi, to speak to us a little bit about the tool that you guys have built that allows for prototyping to go from a digital high fidelity prototype directly into an exported Android and iOS coded native app. So I'll let you guys tell us a little bit more about how this came about and get into the live demo.
Sure. So thanks, Melissa. It's great to have this opportunity. So I'm Pauli, and this is Antti, and we're
Hi.
the founders of Neonto. We're a pretty small company from Finland. We've been working on this a few years now, and we're actually really excited to be able to finally share this with people after such a long time in development. So I think I'll just show you a quick slide to explain what this is about. So let's go into screen share. Oops. So what we have is our product is a visual design environment for the Mac, and like Melissa said, this is a tool that basically produces apps for Android and iOS, and you get the full source code. You get an exported project file that has all the assets, all the code, and that can be deployed as an app on a phone, run on a simulator, or even given to a programmer who can extend it. So this is basically what we let you do is go from design to code. We have a free version called the Personal Edition, which you can download at our website, neonto.com. Then we have a couple of paid plans for different uses. And even though this is basically an independent tool, you can design things within our environment. We also support lots of integrations because we feel that those are crucial to get the workflow really going well. So we have a plugins for Sketch that lets you bring designs and actually do quite cool things with the elements. And then we have all sorts of backend integrations, so you can make your app work with real data. One in particular is that we have a plugin for Google Sheets, which is really convenient. You can just put up stuff in a Google spreadsheet and link that and have it update in real time in your app and even send data the other way. And this is an extensible product, so we can make, or you can make plugins for pretty much any system out there. So with that, let's just go into the demo. I think we'll take about maybe 20 minutes on this. And if you want to do it later, we're going to share all this material on our tutorial site, which is called appcookbook.com. So I'll jump into our product Neonto Studio. And here I have an empty document, and it's very empty. And of course, we could start building something here, but I'd really like to show you the Sketch plugin. And I've actually got prepared a little Sketch document here, which is a design for a very simple three-screen app. So this could be an app for a travel agency, maybe something that organizes these tours. We have three screens: a login, username, password, sign-in button, then a main screen that shows travel plans, and finally a detail screen that will show for each one of these travel destinations more information about that. So obviously, if you want to try this, want to see what it looks like on a mobile phone, there's all sorts of these click-through prototyping tools available, and they're really convenient for just taking a static design like this and having it shown on the mobile screen. You can add some hotspots to move between screens. But even though that's a fast way to get it on the phone, you're going to miss out, even on an app this simple, on quite a lot of things that actually affect or are crucial for how the app would feel. For example, this list here, if we have just a few items, we won't get any feel for what it's like to scroll these items, what it looks like when there's maybe 100 items or different photos, things like that. They are pretty hard to prototype in a click-through. And same thing for this details view. I have here some long text. But if we just export this screen as a static picture, we won't get any idea for what it looks like when we scroll this text. And even things like entering text in a field like this, these are things that a click-through are pretty difficult to make feel real, but with our approach, you'll get an actual native app, and you kind of get all that for free at that point. So I'd like to show you how we go from these screens into an iOS and Android app. And our Sketch plugin is, I've got it installed already. It's called Transfer to Neonto Studio. I can find it here in the plugins menu. We could bring just one artboard, but in this case we'll want all three. So let's click on that. And now we're on the Neonto Studio side, and we have these three blocks for each of our screens. But before I go into the design there, let's set up some basic things for our app. Things like the name, the icon, that are kind of the baseline for what this app, how this app presents itself in the system. So let's give this app a name. So what I'm using here is the app settings. You can access this by clicking on this block that exists in all projects. And I entered a new name. Then let's load an icon from an image file. I have a picture here that's fine for the icon. And finally, the third important setting is this first launch. We should set that to our login screen so that when the app starts, it goes to login. And now we can actually see that the connection was made here between these two. So with that, let's go into the login screen and see what the design looks like. So it's just like what we got from Sketch. And this main design view in Neonto is probably pretty familiar if you've used Photoshop or other drawing tools. We have tools here: pen, rectangle, creating text, colors. Then we have the layers, or as Neonto calls them, elements, and these are organized in a couple of groups, so we can put stuff in the background or foreground, and even in the scroll flow, which is something I'll show you in a moment. And then we have the element creation box. These are all new elements we could create by dragging from here onto the canvas. And finally, we have device previews, and this shows us all the different devices that we plan to support for this project. And here, instantly you see that we have a little problem with the design we brought in from Sketch, because it doesn't adapt to these different device sizes. And of course, Sketch is not a responsive design tool in itself, so that's natural. What we brought in is in absolute coordinates, and now we'd like to make it responsive so it looks nice on all device sizes. Really useful tool in Neonto for making these responsive designs is the keyline. There's a button up here, add keyline. I'll just click on that. And now we have this keyline, which is sort of like a smart guide. I'll place it in the middle and give it the name center. And what we can do next is just select all these elements. And align these to the keyline I just created. Center on keyline. And now we see that these elements are placed in the middle on each kind of screen. And we also want to fix the background photo. And in this case, what we really want for this is to be just stretched out to fill the screen on every device. So the easiest way to do that is to go to the Layout tab here and align this to every edge. And there we have it. This looks pretty okay already on every device size. And the next step for this screen is to simply make the sign-in button do something. Let's go to interaction and make it so that when the user taps on this area, it will go to another screen called Adventures. And now let's take a look at the project map. Again, there are little arrows down here that I can use to reveal the project. Sorry, was there something?
Nope, I think someone just joined the call.
Okay. So yeah, now I have the connections between the login and the main screen, and what we can do next is actually test this out in the iOS simulator. So this simulator is part of the Apple development tools. It's just like an iPhone, except it runs as a window on the Mac. And we'll see in a moment as it opens. We have an iPhone home screen here, and this is our main view. And one thing we immediately notice is that nothing happens when we try to click on these text fields. So that's something I think we want to fix next. But let's try this button we just made. Okay, it takes us to the other screen. That's perfect. Now to complete this login screen, I'll just go back and edit those text fields so that we can get an actual keyboard when somebody in order to type in them. So back here in Neonto, these were the elements we brought in from Sketch, and of course they're just graphics. So the easiest way to make this into a real text field is that we'll just delete these and make a text field element and another one. And let's align these on the key line as well. Move them up a little bit. Oops. So now we have two real text fields. I'll select the first one. What we want to do is have the placeholder text like we had in the design, so that before the user types anything, it shows username. Same for this password field. I'll just enter password as a placeholder. And finally, we want to make this password field an actual password field that hides the input. So let's check password here for field type and try that in the simulator again. So now we get the real keyboard. I can go in and type something. And we also get these little niceties that it scrolls the view up so that it reveals the field if it's too low. And this of course would work on a real phone as well. Anything that works in simulator also works on a real phone. You can just install this as an app on an actual iPhone pretty much just as easily. But I think I can explain that in a bit more detail later. For now, I think we want to make this main screen work. So let's go back into Neonto, choose the adventure screen here, and try to figure out what we want to change here to make this work. So the first order of things I think would be this nav bar. Right now we have a graphic that we brought in from Sketch. We would like to replace that with a real navigation bar. And because the navigation is such a common thing in mobile apps, we have a built-in system that will do that automatically and generate the native pieces that work just like they do in the built-in apps on each platform. So here's a setting called has nav bar. Let's just enable that. Now we have a navigation bar. It shows the back button which reads login, but obviously in this case I don't think we want to go back to login, so I can just disable this here. And another thing is that the color isn't the one we chose. Now it gave me the default color. That's easy to change though. I'll just go back to app settings. And I have here a setting, a screen called app styles, where you'll find some basic styles for colors, fonts, the kind of design baseline for this app. And this navigation bar color is the primary color for each app. So I'll just pick it from the design we had. Now it's the blue, and let's go back to the main screen. We should see it update here. Yep. So that's it for the nav bar. That's all we need to do. It'll work automatically, give us the back button when needed, and so forth. So the next order of things is to make this list an actual list. Before I do that, I'll just lock the background layer here so that I don't accidentally delete it. Because what I'm going to do next is take out these elements and make these here repeat based on data. So let's select all these and delete. And now what remains is these elements that will be the basis of our list. Before I turn it into an actual list, I'm going to rename these because it would be, when we fill it out with data, it's nice to have that these have real names that mean something, so that our we'll have a better understanding of what the data should be to fill it out. So let's call this description, and title is title, and finally this image here, we'll rename that one just image. And now let's select all these, and with them selected, we see a command here called make list. So let's click on that, and now we get a pretty important question: should we create a data sheet for this list? The data sheet is basically the data source that provides the content that is then used to display the list. If we don't have a data sheet, the list will be empty if there's nothing to use as the data source. So in this case, yeah, let's go ahead and create a data sheet. And now we see that, well, we got a repeating list of the same item. It says here row 1, row 2, row 3, and has the same image. Let's quickly just go back to the project map and we'll see what actually happened. So my elements, the ones I selected, have been placed in something called a list item. This is a stencil, it's a repeating item, and then we have a data sheet which currently has 5 rows, it says here. Those were just automatically generated. So what we can do next is open this datasheet editor, and we see that it automatically made us a column called image, title, description. These were the elements I had in my design, so it kind of inferred based on the content I had that, well, these are probably the names we want for the columns. And what we can do now is, I'll just open this design view so we see it here. If we go and change one of these, one, we'll see it reflected in the design over here. And same thing for the other field. And we can also load in the new images. So we don't have just this one repeating image here. Oops, I think I loaded that one twice. So now the list in our design is filled out based on this data we have here. And this is one way of prototyping it, but we could also use a web service like the Google Sheets plugin I mentioned to fill this in. So you don't necessarily have to do it here. You can pretty much use any data source as long as there's a plugin available to provide that. And let's try this one in the simulator again, so we see what it actually looks like now. So yeah, we have a list which is placed as we had it here with these 5 items from our data sheet. So the next thing we had in our sketch design is that there should be a details view for each of these list items, and we had the screen ready for that. So actually it's really easy to make it so that we go into a view that shows this particular item's data. So just back here in the project map, this was our details screen. Just as a reminder, this is what we want to show for each list item. And here we have the list item. So we want to make it so that when the user taps on this, it will take her to the detail. So let's make a hotspot. This is like a generic tappable element. It can be any size. I'll just move it to the background here behind the elements. And with this hotspot selected, let's add an interaction to go to the details screen. And that's it. Let's see what happens in the simulator now. So let's try one of these. Oh, now I see that I don't have the navigation bar enabled for this screen. So let's go fix that. Otherwise we won't get the real back button. So all we want to do is enable nav bar for this detail screen and try again. So now we see that the navigation is handled automatically. We get the standard transition without having to do anything special. We even get these edge actions where you can drag from the edge. Those are enabled on the real phone. All these kind of little nice things that are part of the iPhone platform. You get all these for free because this really uses the native components for everything. And as you can see, even though we didn't change anything in the details view, it gets filled out automatically with the data for a particular row. And still looking back here in the project map, there's this little indicator that says linkage by datasheet row, and that's basically what's happening here is that when this item is used to display something from this datasheet, it will carry over that information to the next screen. So I've shown you the simulator, but we could actually try this button called Open in Xcode just to see how this actually works behind the scenes. Xcode is Apple's development tool. It's what's used to make iOS applications. And here's the generated code for this project. So we get files for each of the screens. This is typical iOS code. If we look quickly through here, we can see things like handling keyboards, handling text editing, handling all sorts of cases. This is what programmers normally have to worry about in a native app. In this case, our tool has generated all this for you in a pretty easy to use way, in the sense that you could actually hand this project over to a programmer who can do something else with it. So just to remind us, this is where we started in Sketch with these static designs, and this is what we made in about 20 minutes, where we have real data coming in, we have navigation, we have this scrollable content. Actually, I didn't discuss that yet, but basically how it works is that I had marked these elements here with this prefix SF for scroll flow, and what our Sketch plugin does is it just automatically will place these in a scrollable container. And another thing worth mentioning is, of course, Android support. It works the same way as we saw for iPhone here. So I could click on Open in Android Studio, and then it's an app that you could run on an Android phone. You could make an APK and send to people. And of course, the same works for what we had here in Xcode. So even though I was using simulator here, running this on a real iPhone would be as easy as connecting the device to the Mac and pressing play, and then it gets installed on your phone locally. So it's not an online prototype, it's not something where you have to go to a website to access, but it's actually an app, just like the other ones on the phone. So I think we're pretty much done with the demo part here. So if you have any questions, we'd love to take those.
Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing. I think that the seamlessness and the fact that you were able to get through the entire demo in 20 minutes is really exciting. And I know that there's a lot of communication gaps that happens between the design and developer teams, and hopefully that this will bridge that gap. But why don't you guys tell us a little bit more about, and while we're hearing from the co-founders, if you guys come up with any questions along the way, definitely come off mute and share those questions. But I'd love to hear more about your background and what problem you kept hearing over and over again. Just sort of paint the story for how this came to be.
Sure, yeah. So actually, my background originally is that I was a film student 15 years ago. I had programming background, and then I started making software tools for that industry, post-production, things like that, and that's how I ended up never doing the film thing, but doing software instead. So I had a, let's call it a small business doing visual effects software, things like that, and actually based on that experience, what we have today is in a way built on that experience. I was doing visual content creation tools then I was working for a while in exclusively in mobile development on various projects, iOS and Android mainly. And what I saw over and over again was that there's a big gulf between designers and developers, especially on a cross-platform project where the the tools available for the designer to communicate something have been very limited, and it takes a long time to really turn that into something real, and then the iteration cycles get so long that you often don't have times to fix things. It's just like, well, okay, now that we finally have this in code, we just have to settle for this. And often if there had been real code much earlier in the process, even maybe in the wireframe phase, you could already make an app skeleton that kind of shows these things like lists and navigation tab bars, so you can get a feel for how many steps there actually are going to be on each, and what does a long list or short list, things like that feel. The kind of fundamental pain point here was that there really should be more code in each phase of development, not just at the very end. And what we're trying to do is let designers do some of that themselves rather than having to have a programmer around just to try things.
I think that that brings up a really good point, and it brings me to my next question, which is, what is your vision for the tool itself? I could see where the limitations for what code is generated, and you said that this allows you to get from design iteration to working code very quickly. But is there any risk with launching with the code that's generated? What are your recommendations for what happens after that? Is this a communication tool, or is this actually eventually going to be a publication tool?
Yeah, that's something we've kind of, I think our customers have experimented with. That is maybe the way to put it. We've had people who make complete apps, especially for something that's quite content driven. Let's say something that has video, books, things like that. You can actually build it pretty much in our tool completely. And for other kinds of apps, there's always the option that you can take the code generated and expand on that with programmers. So you use it for the UI part of the code, which is often quite boring for programmers, especially when it changes a lot. You can cut down on that kind of excess work, trying out things going this way. But definitely, we're not saying that you have to do it that way. I think the benefits of having native code even in the prototyping phase, even if you plan to start over in production, the benefits are still there.
Yeah, definitely. Like for a product manager or anyone who is when you're starting a project, it might take like 2 weeks to get the production environment kept like started. So in that 2 weeks or whatever the time is, you can easily start iterating the product with the customer or even for a salesperson, you can build a native app skeleton or prototype and show it for a customer and sell the project. So yeah, so this can be handy for anyone, but like we said, it's now we are concentrating on the prototyping and for the product managers.
Well, I see a bunch of familiar faces on the Hangout who have a background. Some have a background in graphic design, and some have a background in computer science, and some have a background in both. So I'm going to open up the floor if you guys have any questions.
No one dares to ask.
How about I ask this question? What are the current digital prototyping tools that you're using to create a clickable prototype? And what happens when you pass that off to a developer to continue building it? What sorts of challenges or successes have you seen with your existing solution? We have a shy group today. Graham, Veronica. If we have no questions, that means you did an incredible job with your demo. So
Then we confused them completely. I'm also actually really interested in hearing about what tools people are using. So if anybody wants to comment on that.
If your microphone's not working, you can also use the chat over on the side. Because we may be having technical difficulties. So how about I ask you a couple questions while folks are figuring out exactly the questions. Sergio says that he would love to test it. So the questions will come once they've had a chance to explore the integration with Sketch, and once they actually explore publishing some of the code. So maybe afterwards they'll have a few questions, but I wanted to hear what sorts of feedback have you heard from your users who are not familiar with code? Has this allowed for communication between the designer and the developer for somebody who wasn't previously able to talk about what code needs to be implemented in order to have that interaction? And what challenges maybe have you heard from users with the current iteration? Because I know that this is still early phases of your startup, so there's always more to do, but I think maybe some really early on successes and some current limitations would be exciting to hear about.
Do you have something in mind?
Yeah, I think the feedback for people who really doesn't understand, who doesn't know any coding. I mean, the feedback is usually that, oh my God, this is like I've been waiting for this for many years or the whole life. So usually they are quite excited about it, and also quite common feedback is that you can learn like the basics for coding, because you can do something visually and then you can check the code. I think that's the basic the feedback that we get from the people who are non-developers.
Yeah, there's kind of two groups of people who actually want to get into code and who many have said that they've been waiting to figure out something about these mobile platforms, but here's actually a tool that lets them get over the kind of hump of having to learn everything from scratch. Instead, they can build something visually and then see what the code looks like for that, and they find that really useful for learning. But then the other group of people is those who for example, let's say in a more practical setting, a project manager may not care so much about what the code looks like, but it's really about being able to demo something on the actual phone using these native building blocks. And I think that's been a fairly powerful use case in many ways.
Yeah.
Being able to build those apps even if they may not be taken to production. We have customers who are going the full route with Neonto, using it for UI production. But yeah, of course, the cross-platform aspect here is pretty important. Supporting iOS and Android has been basically a requirement for many years for any app that wants to be popular around the world, and our approach can really take off the edge there, especially for apps that will be developed first on one platform, and then because then even if you launch on iOS, or you know that you can do the other one much more rapidly.
I think that is a really exciting aspect of this, is that you can have a design build and then have that transition between the two platforms. If you have your iOS app, can you actually import that information and then generate the Android code from this?
No, I'm afraid it's one way in the sense that we can
Not
go
yet.
to the design side of the code. So what we've been calling this what you can do in our tool, we've been calling it an app model or a UX model in the sense of what you might see in a CAD program. It's more than just a drawing or a flat design. It's a model of the structure for the app, and that's one of the big things, let's say longer term, that we'd like to tell people more about what you can do when your app is not just static designs and then code, but there's actually this living model in the middle. That's but I don't want to get ahead of time with that, but we have some ideas there.
Yeah, and it's really
I was just gonna ask what the vision is for what's coming next for you guys. What are you working on now? And
Sure. Well, actually, even though I've been talking about iOS and Android here, we already have support for a couple of other platforms. You can do Apple Watch apps in our tool. It's really nice for prototyping what the design would actually look like on the watch, since the watch doesn't have a web browser or anything. So testing an app can be pretty difficult. With our tool, you can make screens really fast, and it goes through the same process as testing on an iPhone, so it's pretty easy. And of course, you can also share data with the watch. Yeah, I see that people are pointing out that just for showing images, it's you can use Keynote. That's very, very true. I kind of forgot about that. But, having the integration between the phone app and the watch app is still something unique for having the actual code. So we have the watch app. We've been also working on various Samsung platforms. We're going to have support for their nice smartwatch called the Gear S2 that's coming soon. Those are sort of short-term things. Then we're exploring some technical things like React Native. If there's anybody who has an interest in that, feel free to holler out, but I'm not going to. That's probably these kind of technical platform plans they're not so relevant for the actual use of the product. It's more like we're thinking about where this needs to go, so that we stay on the, let's call it, the cutting edge of mobile development, because that's one thing that a tool like this can actually help a lot with. When these platforms, they change so rapidly, when there's a new iOS version, things often break. Same happens on many Android devices as well. So with this approach we have, you can actually just re-export the code, and then the changes we have made in the baseline support, which will reflect the latest stuff will automatically be there. So that's definitely one advantage.
And the short-term things, you forgot the Google Sheets plugin. I think we are enhancing the plugins all the time. So there's lots of nice features coming for Google Sheets. It's really handy backend for like a prototype or a simple app. It's quite powerful.
Yeah, anything where you don't have a million lines of data, but let's say if you have a few hundred items for a table, it's perfectly fine to use Google Sheets, and you can also collect data back. You can make apps that are actually deployed, sending stuff. And then we're building more of these cloud integrations, things like sending email, basic but useful stuff that will come in the, let's say, base package, so you don't have to go hunting for that elsewhere.
Very great. Well, we've got a couple of tools that this group is using. We've got Keynote and Slides, Envision, Proto.io, Framer, Zeppelin.io. So I think that the microphones are not working, but perhaps we can follow up afterwards and share a little bit about the pros and cons. Oh, we've got a microphone.
Yeah, that's my mic. Okay, from our experience, like the tool that we use most is Envision, and it depends basically what would we like to achieve. Like there's different stages of the projects that we need to show the prototypes. If we're showing, for example, different flows, or if the flow is the most important, Envision is really good because it's really fast. Otherwise, sometimes when we need something more polished, we use Proto.io. And we've been just testing Framer, which is more like coding based, but give us the sensation of the transitions, animations, and everything of the interaction design like more clearly to give them straight away to the developers.
Yeah, so I think that the assumption that I'd like to test is whether or not Neonto is actually able to provide the speed that you would need to go from just showing the flow, but to also actually show some of the code behind that, or if there's additional steps, if it's higher fidelity and it should be something that happens a little bit later in the design iteration process. So I think that getting a chance to play around and test this would be a lot of fun. So maybe if you could put the slide back up with the information for how we can play with the tool.
Yep, absolutely. So we have a free download called the Personal Edition. You can find that at our website, neonto.com. And then we have App Cookbook, which is our tutorial site. There you'll find some introductory materials and also more specific examples on how to build things. And of course, you can contact us at any time. Send us an email at hello@neonto.com. We also have a chat window on our website. You can use that, or why not on Twitter as well. So if you test this out, we're really happy to help you with anything that comes up.
Excellent. I just want to thank you again for putting this together and for walking through. A 20-minute demo is very impressive for getting all the way into code. So I would love to hear what the community thinks. And again, just thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.